welcome to Forbidden Planet TV, and we are joined today by the fabulous Johnny Sims to talk about his newest book, Family Business.
Hello, I'm very happy to be here.
Cool. Good. We're glad you could make it because you're up in Manchester now. Is it colder up north?
Yes, it is. Today specifically, woke up and was getting dressed and was told, oh, it's a cold snap, and I was like, oh yeah, a cold snap. So, we're probably talking like 1-2 degrees. Looked up and it was like -7, and I was like, oh, okay, I might a few more layers.
Yeah, few more layers. But it adds to the general horror ambience, that cold weather.
Absolutely. So. It's really weird. I find that whatever temperature I am at the time always bleeds into my writing. Like any time, you can always tell when an episode was written in the summer because I'm always referencing like, oh, the oppressive heat, and like whenever it's deep winter, everything I write is like, oh, everyone's super chilly. So yeah, you can. I think it bleeds into my mind more than I think it does.
That's interesting. And with both your books, so Family Business and 13 Stories, were they written in the winter, or were you in the oppressive heat?
Family Business was mainly written in the summer, so like you get more heat than you do cold. 13 Stories, it was actually a real problem because it was written over, because the actual stories take place over the course of a few months, but the stories were written over sort of a year and a half, and so a lot of the early feedback from my editor Rachel was like, Johnny, what time of year is this? Because in this story they're having real problems with the heat, and in this one it's just dipped below freezing. And I was like, oh, I don't know. So one of the first big edit passes I had to do was going through sort of standardizing the time of year.
So Family Business is your second novel.
Yes.
So what can you tell us without too many spoilers about Family Business? I know, right?
Creepy.
Okay.
So it's a book about grief and sort of memory, and who's sort of allowed to be remembered and who society kind of wants to forget, both when they're alive and when they're dead. And spooky monsters. A spooky monster.
And with kind of this book and obviously 13 Stories, so very different kind of structure. Did you find it easier or more difficult to write in that kind of
much harder? Like 13 Stories felt like a bit of a sort of an easy on-ramp actually to transferring from my previous work, which was the Magnus Archives, sort of a sequential, started out as like an anthology series of short horror stories, grew into this massive sprawling meta plot, but at the core was all these standalone episodes. And so 13 Stories, when I got the sort of, because this one was developed, it was developed with Rachel, my editor, and so when she proposed this particular structure, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, no, that's pretty much exactly halfway between what I've been doing already and like full single story novel. So Family Business, taking the one protagonist, start to finish, all one story. It was a different skill that I was exercising in sort of a structural way, but it's really rewarding, and I've really enjoyed it.
Had a great time.
Yeah, had a great time. It was wonderful.
So interestingly enough, when I was reading my proof of this, it was around the same time as the Queen's funeral, which was like super kind of lined up in a weird way. So was there a particular kind of did that kind of have an extra impact for you?
Interestingly, I finished and sent through the manuscript a while before the Queen's funeral, but I'm currently writing my next book, the finale of which actually takes place during, well, not during the Queen's funeral, but during that period. Just because I couldn't like that week where the whole of central London had turned into that creepy morning central where every bus stop was just black and white photo of the Queen's dead face. It's so unsettling that I was like, I think that's a really good backdrop to a lot of the stuff that I'm putting into my third book.
Yes. Oh, interesting. So, where did you come up with the names for the family business in question, Slough Sons? So, where did you?
Where did I like? I think I was just going through a bunch of because I wanted them to sound. I wanted them to sound like they had their roots in a sort of a working class London background, and so there was sort of a particular group of names, and I'm not. In some ways, I love a bit of subtlety. In other ways, I think that you don't have to be too subtle. And when I got to Slough, that is a good name, and can also be sloth, to shed something. And obviously, with the themes of memory and forgetting, I was like, is that too much? No, it's not too much.
Just the right amount. So with this book in particular, very kind of character led, which is just fantastic. So we're looking at kind of first kind of Angie and Diya, so the pacifist and the fighter. So which would you say you were personally?
Oh, I don't know. I think it's tricky because there is an element of any character in a book that reads true has some of you in it. You know, in many ways, creating a cast of characters feels like portioning up different bits of your soul, different thoughts or instincts or feelings, and expanding them out into whole characters, fleshing them out. I don't think there's any main character in family business that doesn't have a substantial amount of me in them. So I think in that case, the sort of where there is conflict or that sort of dichotomy, it is one that I myself have not easily been able to reconcile.
Yeah.
You know?
Interesting. So there's even a part of you in Frank.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. The instinct to just get by.
Yeah.
Like take the deal that's offered. Like in a sort of a wide societal term.
Yeah.
And just like justify it to yourself. Absolutely. There's a part of me that has that instinct, and it's a part that I struggle against a lot of the time, I think.
And there's I think as well with the kind of obviously the darkness of the novel, but there's some kind of great moments of lightness and clarity, and especially with the different characters. So as I call her, the not so psychic Mary. So it's like there's something about the not so psychic Mary and the kind of rocker character of Zen. So how did you come about kind of finding those characters?
I think I mean Zen was easy.
Yeah.
Zen is in many ways a portrait of some of like just my favorite people in my life, or have been in my life throughout the years, sort of distilled into one character that I'm just like, yeah, she fucking rocks.
Yeah.
Mary is a different sort of amalgamation. Like, I think there is a lot of there's a lot in Mary that frustrates me, but that I understand. I've known plenty of people throughout my life who are varying degrees of sort of superstitious, but in a sort of wider spiritual sense. And it's always an odd one because I'm always I always have my own deep skepticism with the fact that I am also, in a lot of ways, quite superstitious. And like I really like Mary because she is that, but also deep down she knows that it is a defense mechanism, a way of she's almost conscientiously a kind of a bit woo.
Yes.
as I'm trying to remember somebody I used to know who always used the phrase a bit woo in terms of like people who are into like new age or psychic or that sort of thing. I can't remember who it was, but yeah, she's very much a character who is deliberately and conscientiously that, in a way that perhaps masks a deeper skepticism than anyone else.
Interesting. And you touched on there, so you would consider yourself to have, for example, like greeting a magpie in the morning, those kind of superstitions. Is there any kind of weird ones that you kind of follow?
I'm a big believer in the placebo effect, and I believe that it extends a lot further than medicine. Like, I love crystals. I love a magic rock. Like, do I believe they actually do anything? Well, I mean, yeah, in the sense that, like, they will alter my own perception, my own attitude, and like, they can very much like, oh, I've got a bit of amethyst. That is definitely going to placebo my energy better. Yeah, so that sort of thing. Or like, I really like tarot stuff. I don't believe that tarot has the ability to tell the future in any sort of actively magic way, but I do believe that it is really good at helping you read your own mind. You know, you lay out these cards and they present a series of symbols that you turn into a story based on your own life and your own perceptions. So I think I am a bit superstitious in the sense of I love the trappings of mysticism and the way that you can assign them your own meanings and powers. Also, you know, if I have a real run of bad luck, I might just like, you know, pick up a little evil eye thing just in case. In case. Because I mean, I do not believe that there is anything that cannot be explained in mundane terms. But I also believe that what counts as mundane terms, like 500 years from now, is probably going to be radically different to what we consider mundane terms now. You look at all sorts of, like quantum entanglement and all this sort of stuff, and you're like, okay, the universe is really weird. There could be some really weird stuff out there, and things that like hundreds of years from now will be like, yeah, well, obviously, like ghosts. Like you might be like, oh yeah, obviously ghosts exist, or like what we used to call ghosts. They're actually X, Y, and Z. But I've got no idea right now, so I'm not writing anything off.
I suppose it's easier to not be proved wrong, so you could just say anything's possible.
Anything is possible.
There you go.
You know,
we have to kind of obviously touch on the Geeky Games Night.
Yes.
So, what would you be playing on your ideal Geeky Games Night?
Oh goodness, what a question. I mean, it's tricky because my answers at the moment are very different to what they might otherwise be, because over the last few years I haven't had a chance to get my friends around for as many board game nights as I really want. So I've got things like Food Chain Magnet, or I've got an untouched sealed copy of The King's Dilemma that I am desperate to crack into, but it's like quite a long-term commitment, and like I need to get a group organised to actually properly play through it. So I really like I really like a big chunky board game. I've got a group who we just call Big Board Game Club, where periodically we'll get together to be like, if we want to play like a Twilight Imperium or something like, which is going to be an all-day game, we can just be like, okay, we'll just mark it today out to play through this. I I am currently really halfway through a campaign of Gloomhaven with my partner, Sasha, and I'm really into Brass Birmingham at the moment because it is the most exquisitely, like, almost parodically boring board game. Like, it is everything. It's like, yes, it's about so you are an industrialist at the turn of the Industrial Revolution in Birmingham. Now, initially, you are using iron, coal, and to create a canal network, but the canal network becomes obsolete halfway through the game, and it's just so, like, it sounds like a parody of, like, dry board games, but it is so compelling in a way that I'm like, I find it both compelling and very amusing to be like, okay, so here's what we're playing, and people are like, really? And then an hour later, they're like, oh no! Oh, I can't put another coal mine in Belper! Oh!
Oh, I mean, this sounds incredible. I mean, I'm actually from the Midlands, so it's like, you know, my ancestors. I should probably play it.
It's a good time. It's a good time. If you like board games, it's a really good time.
I'm getting, I think, more into board games. So I was always like a predominantly JRPG gamer, Final Fantasy, the full works. And then, my boyfriend's got me into, like, tabletop gaming.
Nice.
So,
nice.
Yeah.
I've also currently finishing up a role-playing campaign of Root, which is a lot of fun. We, myself and Sash, we run a small RPG publishing company called MacGuffin & Co. So we are constantly just overwhelmed with RPGs that we are never going to get a chance to actually play, but we're like, oh, this is so good. Oh, the mechanics are really interesting. I mean, we're never going to play it, but we could take that mechanic and use it for etc. So yeah, the geeky game night in family business is very much drawn from life, from my experience, and something that I'm sorely missing at the moment. I think there was definitely a wistful aspect when I was writing that bit in lockdown.
Bring back geeky games night. So yeah, no, definitely. So to kind of bring it back to, we kind of, I suppose, touched on before the almost like the big bad from the book. So we have Mr. Bill, which there's definitely some X-Files-y kind of vibes a bit there. So
yeah, he's got, like, I feel like Mr. Bill is a good monster of the week that I've really enjoyed, like, getting my fingers properly into and, like, expanding it on over the course of an actual book, because I feel like he's the sort of concept you will often get in, like, an episodic show, and, like, a lot of the stuff will be gestured at. You'll be like, oh, that's a really good idea. Oh, it's a shame they didn't have a chance to, like, go any deeper or do anything more. And by, like, I love a monster. Big fan of monsters, both as, like, you know, metaphorical writing designs and as just, like, horrible gooey dudes.
Yes.
You know, big fan of, like, recently been replaying through some Bloodborne, and the monsters. But Mr. Bill is very much, like, in the former, like, ooh, what an interesting, what a conceptually interesting idea for a monster. And a lot of my stuff, I think, I tend to go for quantity in that sort of sense. Like 13 stories. They're not exactly 13 monsters, but they're, like, every story has its own little haunting, its own little sort of its own thing that you could call, like, the monster of the story. So, and it's the same with something like Magnus or anything like that. I like to have a good a smorgasbord of horrible critters. Family business, just the one.
Yes.
Just the one. But it gives you such a scope to get in there and actually explore the ideas and explore the monster.
Yes, and it kind of, it's very insidious as well how it happens. It kind of, the first half of the book is not that it's a different book as such, but you're trying to kind of get to grips with, obviously, the main character dealing with the grief and, you know, her new job and kind of what they do, and then it slowly unsettling.
Yeah, the rhythm of horror is a very interesting thing, and it's one of the hardest things to nail over the course of a novel length text. Like, I think that often you will find that sort of even in books that are full novels, the rhythm within the rhythm within the book still tends to kind of mirror that of almost a short story. They tend to be like quite standalone scenes that crest into the moment of horror and then dip back down. So I've completely forgotten my original point. But yeah, I think you're right.
Thanks.
Sorry, I just got thinking about rhythm in horror novels, and I was like, I have no idea what actually got me onto talking about that.
Well, I think as well, I suppose horror as it used to be, and horror is definitely having a resurgence of late, which is obviously great news.
Yes, it starts off slow.
There we go.
Yes. Yes. But the difficulty obviously is that if you when you're telling lots of small stories, you can crank it up as high as you want at the end. Doesn't matter. You're resetting for the next story.
Yeah.
When it's all the same story, you've got to keep your handle a lot tighter on how creepy it gets. Yes. Like you're still getting the gradually building crescendos, but you can't go quite as high, quite as quick. You've got to gradually turn up the dread, which means that I think usually you do, like, certainly with I would say a traditionally plotted novel, which is just telling a single story start to finish, more or less. You do generally have a slower, slightly more insidious start.
And it's definitely there seems to be kind of almost a change, just thinking of the horror that a lot of us grew up with, and like obviously Stephen King and stuff, where you have these like whopping huge books that you kind of tucked into for weeks. And I think now there seems to be a kind of trend for something shorter and like snappier, that obviously things like the Tour de Pomme novellas, the things that it's 200 pages and it's going to get you in those 200 pages. I think,
my slightly cynical answer is that, like, Stephen King and his ilk and a lot of the people we grew up reading, they were writing at very much the first big horror boom of the 70s and 80s. And a lot of the people involved in the first big horror boom of the 70s and 80s got so big that if they didn't want to be edited, they didn't have to be edited.
Yes.
And I would probably say most Stephen King books could do with a little bit of editing, actually. So I don't know. I think there's an aspect of like, well, modern horror books are just more like slightly better edited than the whopping tomes before. Also, I think that like writing styles have developed and changed. Like Stephen King very much was a pioneer of what we think of as like the bestseller mode of like the page turner, where like you got short chapters and every chapter ends with something that makes you go, oh, I need to read it. And it's why it's so easy to, like, you say like, oh, you read for weeks, but I've got through Stephen King Doorstoppers in like 3 days, because you're like, I can't put this down, because every chapter ends and you're like, oh, what's and it's very readable, it's very bingeable, but I also think that is a writing style that has fallen a little bit out of favour, because when done poorly it can feel very rote, it can feel very formulaic, and so I think there's a move to a slightly more flowing, artistic, I don't know what I've got, slightly more varied writing style in the horror space, which lends itself more to this sort of book, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. Is there any other horror authors, like new horror authors, that you want to check out?
I love like Stephen Graham Jones, The Only Good Indians.
Yeah.
Very, very good. I'm currently getting through. Blanking on that. It's Only Blackened Teeth. I think it's
Cassandra Core. Yes.
Yeah.
Both
really good.
Absolutely wonderful.
And although I will be honest, I am constantly a bit ashamed of my stack of to read books. I find it very hard to read horror when I'm writing horror, which is very counterintuitive and ultimately quite unhelpful, because generally I'll be reading a book and I'll be like, oh, if I'd read this when I was writing Family Business, but it's just like a psychological thing that I find that once I stop writing, I'll enter like a recharge period where I'll be absolutely devouring books, and I'm currently in a writing period.
Yes.
So I'm just looking at this stack of just amazing authors and being like, yeah, I'll get to them soon.
Eventually. You should definitely check out, if you haven't already, Eric LaRocca.
Eric LaRocca, I know the name. What's
the weirdest short stories, but they're just so like you just devour the whole thing. But he's so obviously you're here today at Forbidden Planet's head offices, but it's Titan Books head offices, and obviously they publish Stephen Graham Jones, etc. All the great horror authors. But yeah, Eric is one of their newer authors they picked up.
That's really cool. Well, do you know, is there a particular collection I should be on the lookout for?
So currently they've picked up 2. There's a huge back catalogue of stuff. There's also a 3rd one coming out with Clash Books next year. Clash are doing some absolute great surreal weird horror. So definitely check out Clash.
Oh, I recently picked up a really nice edition of The Ballad of Black Tom. From Victor LaValle,
he's got a new book next year as well, which I'm super
very excited.
Very, very excited for next year. So you mentioned before as well about Bloodborne. So would you ever play Bloodborne on you? Because you're on Twitch as well.
Yeah. I've played it on Bloodborne. I've played Bloodborne on Twitch twice now. Once just as a straight. It was I think the first game I played through on Twitch, and I recently went through it again because I forget where it came from, but it was because I'm not a big fan of the threaded cane. I don't think it's
did they make you play?
Yeah. So my criticism of it is it's a foppish weapon for fancy lads. So they got me to play it. My community got me to play it through as the sort of the fanciest lad.
Okay.
So I could only ever upgrade my armor or my weapon if it was fancier than what I already had. Which you know how long it is until you get a fancier bit of armor than your starting waistcoat. It's quite a while.
Yes. Well, you could do the doll's dress, but yeah, that is later, isn't it?
Well, and also the doll's dress has some of the worst stats in the game.
Probably, yeah.
Eventually, I forget, there was one that I managed to get that I was like, okay, I think this is actually has decent stats and is fancier than my starting waistcoat. But I eventually ended up in the Canehurst Knights outfit, which very fancy, very frilly sleeves.
That is, yeah. That's
so yeah, that was really I've done a couple of playthroughs of that, and I was doing a playthrough of Elden Ring. I've put that on pause because it's really, really, really long, and so I was like, I'm actually starting to get a bit burned out on Elden Ring, so I'm gonna put that on pause. I'm currently playing through Prey, which
okay.
I'm quite enjoying. I always think I enjoy immersive sims more than I do, and then when I'm in the middle of them, I'm like, first person stealth gets on my nerves, but I'm having a good time. Sorry, I'm sure there was a question.
No. I mean, we're all huge gamers around here as well, so it's always just super interesting to hear kind of what people are playing through and stuff. So with the just thinking with the who has the cage helmet, would that be considered fancy?
the Mensis.
Yes.
Probably not. At least it wasn't like. The thing is, there's a lot of stuff in Bloodborne that looks fancy, and then you put it on, you like show it off for chat, and chat's like, it's a bit rusty.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh yeah, it is a bit rusty actually. Yeah, it's quite. Yeah, you're right. That's not actually quite as fancy as this. Oh, I was wearing Father Gascoigne's scarf.
Yes.
Top for quite a while. And I forget who. There's a particular character who has very, very precisely creased trousers, and they ended up being my trousers for quite a lot of the game.
Oh my god, yeah, Bloodborne is just it's too good, and
it's a great one.
Oh, the whole lore of the universe and stuff.
It's wild. Like, just sort of diving into it and being like, oh wait, that's what I've been doing. Oh, okay.
Have you ever thought about doing a lore book for the Magnus Archives?
I mean, there is a very comprehensive wiki that fans put together and that I have used heavily in writing a lot of the later seasons. The answer is yes and no. I think there are, because the lore of the Magnus Archives is so there's sort of two sides to them. There's there's like names, places, dates, all this sort of stuff, and that's stuff that's all in the wiki. Like I don't feel like I feel like sort of putting out a book that's like, oh, here's all the stuff, like that's just the show. But I think a lot of it is the other sort of side of lore is in terms of like thematics and metaphysics and this sort of thing, which is a lot trickier in a lot of ways, because there is so much of how the Magnus Archives world because there is so much and there's another side of the lore which is kind of how the Magnus world works in terms of metaphysics and themes, and that's tricky because in many ways it's quite a muddy area, and one where I hesitate to put a lot of the stuff in writing because so much of it is down to your own interpretation, down to your own responses and feelings towards what's in the show, and I sometimes worry that being like, this is how this thing works is actually taking stuff away from the world of Magnus rather than adding it in. I think it is the sort of thing that is a challenge that I might relish getting into in the right circumstances.
Yes.
But it's not something I have an instinct to do at this point.
Okay. No, fair enough. Well, I mean, it would make an amazing book. Just thinking, or something similar to like Terror Tome or something.
Yeah.
That's like my other favourite of the year. I freaking adore Terror Tome.
I haven't had a chance to get all the way through it yet, but I mean, I that is the Garth Marenghi one.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah. No, I'm a big Dark Place fan, and very excited to crack into it.
Yes. Oh, so good. So to finish off the interview, and because obviously we've got loads of books for you to sign. So you mentioned briefly that you're obviously working on a new book. Can you tell us anything about your?
Yeah, I think so. You know what? Actually, yes. Okay. Yes, I can. Thinking about it. So current provisional title is Burnout. It is a lot about. So I've recently left London, as you mentioned right up top of the interview, and it was not initially conceived as such, but it is kind of turning into what I'd almost call a breakup letter to London.
Okay.
I think that sounds a lot. Basically, it's about how hot the London Underground is, but like there's a lot involved in like the weird quirks of thermoregulation in London, but as a it feels very representative of how London as a whole is kind of calcifying, kind of dying. Like no one lives in the centre of London anymore. It's all just like empty investment properties, and like the areas you can live in London are gradually dwindling. People are leaving. You can't grow old in London anymore in a very real way. And so all of that sort of combined with some horrible monsters.
I mean, why not?
Exactly.
Come on. Well, thank you so much for coming down today and joining us, and for about to sign all.
Just to be clear, I should probably mention, no guarantee that one's ever coming out. Actually.
Okay.
It's what I am working on at the moment.
Okay.
But it is not. There is no current publication date or anything like that.
We'll just kickstart this if we have to.
Well, who can say? Who can say? So that's what I'm currently working on.
Yes.
But TBD.
Yes.
If it ever sees the light of day.
Okay. I have all faith.
I'm touch wood.
Yes.
Superstition. I'm low key hopeful.
Okay. Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and obviously lots of stuff to sign. So thank you.
Thank you.
And yes, there will be signed copies available to pre-order now on forbiddenplanet.com, and all of our stores will be receiving signed stock because they're all huge fans. Speak to you soon. Bye.
If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.